Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lina. Good to see you.
How are you?
Good, great. It's super to be, to have you on this live chat with the BabyChakra team and with all the BabyChakra moms and dads who are watching us live right now. The topic for today, of course, is, virtual preschool versus no preschool at all, which is really the reality we face before us today in this time of lockdown. But I think something that my team shared with me and that really resonated was the hashtag that we find on the marketing material around this live chat, right? Which is hashtag learning, not lockdown,
Yes.
right? So, I think the purpose that we're so excited to have you on board, Lina, because I think, of course, everyone knows you, everyone knows I think, the legacy that you've built, which is Kangaroo Kids in Billabong High. You are the founder of Billabong High. You are the founder of Kangaroo Kids. You started your career as a teacher. And I mean, I think goes without saying, you're one of the most renowned educators and edupreneurs in India today. You've been an inspiration to so many of us entrepreneurs who are trying to create really impactful companies and missions in the whole mom child ecosystem. So, I mean, kudos to you. You know that already.
That's super kind.
In the interest of time, I want to kind of dive deep into this because this is a topic that's come up so many times on the Baby Chakra community with so many, thousands of our parents. It is one of the probably it's an unprecedented time to say the least. I think that word has been overused and reused to describe this context and to describe the situation we are in. It's also a time of, I think, it's been a time of great stress, right, for a lot of families, for a lot of kids at home. So I think just diving into the first piece and the first question I have is, how are you doing? How has the lockdown been treating you? Tell us a little bit more about that, and how are you dealing with the lockdown overall?
So quite a few things. First is don't think I've ever depended on my neuroscience research as much as I have at this point in time. So the first thing is I'm very mindful of the language I use. I don't use the word lockdown. Somebody the other day called me up and said, "How are you coping?" I said, "I'm doing wonderfully well." I said, "I don't have the word coping in my vocabulary because, the neuroscience will tell us that the words that we use are going to impact the experience that we have, right?" So I think that's the first thing that I'm doing, is very, very mindful of the language I use. The second thing I'm doing is, something that I learned from an Anthony Robbins Date with Destiny I went to. I think it's one of the most profound learnings I've had. And, it's there in our ancient scriptures and in ancient cultures, this learning very often. But Anthony Robbins packages it so well, and he says, when you're faced with anything that you do not like the experience of, it could be a situation or anything like that, you actually only have three options. One is to suffer. So you have a choice to suffer if you would like to. The second is to change your life conditions. So, if you're in a bad marriage, you can get a divorce. If you're in a bad job, you can change your job. But in this instance, we really cannot change the life condition. Then you only have one more option. So actually, in this case, we only have two options. One is to suffer, and one is the third option, which is to change what it means to us. What does this time mean to us? So I'm a forever optimist. I call myself a Pollyanna, and I'm hoping that this time when we come out at the other end is going to be a renewal of sorts, that we've all had time to pause and we've all had time to reflect on things that are really important to us. In fact, my post on my Instagram today is, what's your first thought of what you're missing? And most people, if you think about it, then it becomes your second thought, because your first thought comes from your soul. And if you go with your first thought, people are not usually missing restaurants or travel. We're missing a walk in the park. We're missing hugs or laughter with friends. So, we've been so conditioned to think of secondary things that are important to us, when the primary things, the things that our soul yearns for, is actually not that challenging. I mean, most of us in places of privilege who have just shelter and food can be in that position of making that choice, to think that it's a time of renewal for the planet. The other thing I do is, I keep telling kids, if you stagnate, there's only you stagnate, you start regressing. So you have to keep growing. If you look at any plant, and the only way for us to keep growing is to keep learning. So I kind of cut my day into parts. One part is devoted to learning. So I'm currently doing a course on cognitive behavioral therapy. I've signed up for another course when this gets over on storytelling, and not storytelling as in telling kids stories, but the power of storytelling in everything that you do. And I've signed on for a Mind Valley course as well, which is around the silver mind control, which is understanding the different brainwave patterns that we have. So anything in the area of neuroscience, behavioral science, energy science just fascinates me, and I keep one part of my day is just for that. Another part of my day is to create. So it could be this morning, as I was just kind of running through some of the questions that you were going to ask, just having a thought process and just scribbling down some notes. So that's creating, or writing a story for kids is creating, or doing my blog posts are creating. So some part of the day is left for creating. And then some part of the day is left for family. So we play cards. We're raising money for the PM Cares Fund. We play with very high stakes. We're playing flush. Yes, we're gambling, but we're doing gambling for a good cause.
Fantastic.
So we put all the money that we lose into this bag, and all that money is going to the PM Cares Fund. So whoever wins doesn't have to pay. So that's family, the food and the games we play. So I've just kind of cut my day into different bits. I also exercise for at least 20 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on how I feel. I'm not a great I don't get very motivated to exercise, but I make sure I do that, and then I spend some time doing Netflix. So exactly what I tell kids, that part of your day has to be towards your cognitive growth, part of your day has to be towards your emotional growth, part of your day has to be towards your spiritual growth, which is creating, and part of your day has to be, just for entertainment and letting your hair down. So there's a time and place for everything. The other thing that I do is meditate, because, again, more at this time than ever, our brains are hardwired for fear. And if we allow ourselves to run away in that, 95% of our times, our thoughts are either in the past or the future. And if we allow ourselves to be in the past, it's of no use. So we tend to go in the future, and that brings a lot of fear, because there's uncertainty about the future. So the more you can stay present, the better it is. So we've got a sympathetic nerve system, which when you're scared, sort of releases all this cortisol, all this fear chemical, and meditation calms that all down. It kind of counteracts that. So yes, you need to spend some time on meditation. So yeah, those are the kind of ways in which I'm spending my time. I've also, taken on a personal quest. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, so through this time, as I was doing a lot of learning and a lot of reading, I actually saw the Wuhan market post that went viral. And then I heard Peter Woolen almost at the same time. So when things happen to me, what we call it coincidentally, I never take them as coincidence. Peter Woolen in his thing, again, which is posted on my social media, has made a very powerful case for that. In fact, if we all turn vegetarian, there is going to be no starvation in the world. And we take away a lot of the earth's problems by way of turning vegetarian. And it's not that I'm asking anybody else to be vegetarian, but I can do my bit. And I've chosen to, turn vegetarian at this time. So yeah, so that's, and then I do Zoom meetings. I speak to my instructional design team, things that we're all doing. And I did a workshop for the teachers of Maldives online. I've also started a new path, which is interviews. So I've done an interview with Sugata Mitra, the guy behind the Hole in the Wall experiment, as to his views on how technology is going to impact us going forward. I did one last night with Andrew Newman, who writes these beautiful stories called Conscious Stories. I did one with Daniel Markowitz, who has written a book called The Meritocracy Trap. So I'm working on a parent portal at the same time, because this time is a time when you're sitting at home, I'm sitting at home, all these very important people I'm interviewing are sitting at home. And for the one time, they actually have time for my interviews. So yeah, that's how I'm spending my time.
Wow. I mean, so I think both as a mother as well as an entrepreneur, I think this was really inspiring. And I think 2 or 3 things stood out in what you shared. Number one, this constant looking at a situation as an opportunity, right? And as a blessing, right? And being grateful for what we have, and how do we make the most of what we have, and how do we make it better? How do we make what's around us better? I think that is something that is seriously inspiring, Lina. And I think it's a pervasive trait in entrepreneurs, but also I think in educators such as yourself, you're basically like constantly learning yourself, right? And that's, I think, a mission that probably defines your life in so many ways, right? I think the second thing I'm taking away is that this discipline, or at least this maintaining our feeling of excitement, of positivity, comes a lot from also being able to fit in what is actually valuable to us at this point in time, which is family, which is what keeps us energized, right? I mean, whether it's, for you, talking to interesting people and getting to know their stories, or, being involved in creative projects. So yeah, I think overall extremely inspiring points. And, thanks for sharing that, Lina. I think personally as well, extremely exciting to, and very helpful for me to also sort of take away. I think, I think just to get to a very specific question now, it's, since it's a time for renewal, since it's a time to like sort of move ahead, right? And since when we look around us, the life as we know it has changed, right? So I mean, for the first time in history, the government has allowed telemedicine, for instance. What we thought, you have to go to a doctor and then have the touch, feel, sort of everything, like all your vitals, statistics, things taken to for the doctor to give you care. I mean, the doctor is now online, right?
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the same sort of phenomenon play out with preschools. A lot of preschools, a lot of schools are now coming online, and they're helping parents and they're helping kids with the educational journey. What's your thought on this as an educationalist? I mean, where do you stand on this? How are you thinking about this phenomenon and the future for this ahead of us?
So a couple of things. One is I'm telling parents out there that however you feel about everything is how your kids will feel about it. So if you actually think virtual schooling is great and it's good fun and it's beneficial, that's how your kids will feel about it as well. So, we underestimate how much our kids take away from us. So, I've got my son staying here at the moment. I mean, he's 29 years old, so he's not a baby anymore, but he's still watching me, right? He's still watching me that I've kept routine, I've kept structure, I've kept all of this, and I'm not at all feeling fearful in any way. So that's the energy he's going to feed off. So our kids are feeding off our energy all the time. So exactly how you feel about it is how your kid's going to feel about it. I'm telling parents and teachers, use this more as an opportunity for emotional connection rather than rigorously following the curriculum and the syllabus. So what happens when kids come online? They see other friends online. So they suddenly realize that what's happening to them is actually normal and is happening to all their friends. So it brings that element of normalcy around their experience. The other thing is that as long as you don't use this as me teaching in class, right? So as long as you keep it for active learning, engagement, emotional connection, and the kids are doing as much of the, so it's not like a, the chalk and talk method that you're going back to that. You're keeping preschool active and engaging. So, you've got music going on and all the kids are dancing together. You've got you're teaching them alphabets, and the kids have got chapati dough with them, and they're making it out of the chapati dough instead of your normal clay or anything like that. So as long as you're keeping it active and engaging, it's great. I mean, I had some videos, but I don't know how to do screen sharing, and I'm not going to try. But I have, when we're talking about seasons, and different kids have taken on the onus of teaching a different season. So you've got one kid with a woolen hat on and gloves, and he's talking about winter, and then you've got another kid with sunglasses and a sun hat on, and she's talking about summer. So as long as you've got kids engaged in the process and it's not just me speaking and you having to listen, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So here's an exciting thing, because we're blending the digital and the physical world. So if we can keep the blend of the digital and physical world intact, that's just absolutely the best way, kids can feel engaged. You just want them emotionally, mentally, and physically engaged. That's it. So I'm not asking them to now do assessments online, or, if we're doing the color red and we're doing numbers, the teacher may say, okay, everyone run away while the music's playing and go and collect 2 red objects, and things like that. So the teachers are demonstrating and the kids are active, and as long as that's happening, so the teacher's a coach rather than a teacher, and she's demonstrating and leading, and parents play a little role in it, because we're teaching hot and cold. You've got a bowl of warm water and a bowl of cold water, so you're sort of doing simulations and stuff like that. It's fantastic.
I think it's really interesting that I think, in Kangaroo Kids, what you're basically talking about is a paradigm of a virtual school that's created not just for, older kids, it's also for toddlers, right? And at the preschool level. And I think you've laid out a few of these examples, but tell us a little bit more. I mean, I think, BabyChakra has, I mean, the majority of mothers in BabyChakra have, kids of the toddler age, right? So we've constantly got questions on, how would a virtual preschool work for my toddler child, right? Is there something like too much screen time? Is there something like screen time that I should now be cognizant about? And, what kind of an impact does it have on my preschooler? So could you tell us a little bit about, and maybe go a little bit more granular on how that's playing out in your experience with the launch of the virtual class that Kangaroo Kids has undertaken?
So we are very lucky because we actually have instructional design as a process at the back, which we've always had. So teachers, it makes it much easier for teachers because they already have the recipe for the classroom with them. Now, the things like resources that are normally in the school or that we send from the office, that they have to design. So teachers are being very creative about how. Are you there, Naiyya?
Yes, I am there. I am
got
there.
For a second.
Yeah.
So then the teachers are just using the creativity to, to make teaching aids at home and stuff like that. But, there's moms can do like millions of things with their kids at home, and you do it for the connection. Don't do it for the academic learning. Kids are learning all the time when we forget that. I'm not I'm not undervaluing the value of preschool because you're mixing with kids, etc. But the kids are learning all the time wherever they are. They're learning from their environment. And there's lots and lots of things that we can do. But one of the things I want to address that you spoke about is screen time. So I just want all of us to just kind of breathe into that, because we've always been scared of new technology. There was a time when we first discovered or invented print, right? Socrates actually warned parents that and what the exact phrase he uses, it will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls because they will not use their memories, right? So this is when we invented print. So he also warned against fairy tales, because he warned that kids really don't know the difference between imaginative worlds and real worlds. And he thought that was something to be scared of. So we know today that neither the textbook or the storybooks are anything to be scared of. Then we were scared of radio. Then we were scared of television. So we've constantly, in fact, CNN once reported that email hurts the IQ more than pot. Now, one of the things I want parents who are watching this to be very mindful of is fear drives TRP ratings. So the less we watch media, the better it is for us.
You should say that one more time. I think it's an extremely critical message.
So, our brains are wired for fear, and the media knows this. So the media uses this constantly, whether you're watching pro-Trump or anti-Trump, or you're watching coronavirus numbers all around the world. If you watch it, it's constantly feeding on our fear. And again, I've got an article on that up on my social media, exactly what it does to our brain wiring. So, it's not the use of tech, but it's what we use technology for that's important. So, give you an example. As long as you're not watching news, right? I use technology from the moment I wake up till the moment I sleep. I use it in the morning to meditate. I then use it to learn, because I'm podcasts or learning, or I'm watching TED Talks, or I'm doing courses online. I then use it to exercise. There's a walk at home app that I use that I'm using, to exercise. Then I use it for interviewing. I'm using technology right now. And then I'm using to listen to music, which again is really, beneficial to my central nervous system. And then I use it for a little Netflixing, right? So as long as you're using it like that, it's okay. If you're using it, say for instance, you wake up in the morning and you're using it for social media, and then you're watching it to feed the fear in your brain and keep watching news, and then you're having intrusive notifications constantly coming on. I have absolutely zero notifications on my phone or on any of my tech. I will go to the WhatsApp or anything else when I want to. So I'm in control of the tech. The tech doesn't control my life. So as long as we use that and kids watch us, they will use technology in exactly the same ways that we use it. And again, at night, if I can't sleep, I'm listening to brainwave entrainment or binaural music, which beat music, which kind of lulls me to sleep. So I'm using it throughout the day. So if you're using it for the joy of learning and growing, that's how your kids will use it as well. So I just want us to be, to take that absolute fear around technology away. There's again, I want to quote, there's an article written in 1883, right, in a medical journal called Sanitarian. And it said that schools exhaust the children's brains and nervous systems with complex and multiple studies and ruin their bodies by protracted imprisonment. That's in a medical journal.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so I would tend to believe that more of conventional schools than I would that technology is going to completely destroy your kids, right? So we just have to be wise about the way we use technology, and our kids are watching the way we use it. Now, there's two ways of using technology. One is just to consume something, right? And if what you're consuming is of high quality and it's helping you learn, then it's okay. But if what the kids are consuming constantly, it's sedentary screen watching of YouTube and senseless videos and only cartoons and stuff like that, then that's not recommended, obviously. So, we just, and also for parents, if you can cast anything onto a larger screen, it's less harmful for your kids' eyes. So we actually don't know, everyone's guessing about the effects of technology. And obviously everyone's erring on the side of caution, but it's a disempowering way to think, rather than erring on the side of, how can I use this to empower my life, which is a much better way to kind of think. So technology and screens can be part of a very healthy child's life. And as long as you're using this, and I actually went online to an Australian site and I caught a checklist, right? So I'm just going to read out from the checklist. So as long as you're using it actively rather than passively, and make sure you balance the screen time with other activities like physical activities, reading, creative play, social time with family and friends, and you're not using it around any of those times, it's fantastic. More often than not, it's the very parents who I see scream against technology used in schools, who then, when you go to a restaurant, have got something on because their kids are getting distracted by that so that they can have their social time without the intrusion of their kids, which is not a great way, because that's what our kids are going to learn if that's what we teach them, that you can use technology to distract yourself, which is not what it's supposed to be for, as long as you're actively engaging with it. There's a checklist for a healthy approach to screen time. So if mums and dads, if you can check all these off, then your child's screen use is balanced. Is your child sleeping enough? Is your child physically healthy? Is your child engaged at school? Is your child connecting socially online and offline? Is your child interested in books, art, and physical play? Is your child learning while using screens? And are you monitoring that your child is using high quality content? As long as all those things are done, I would say, 2 hours of screen time a day is not going to hurt your preschooler. Do it for half an hour at a time, and then in between, make sure your child's having a physical activity, and do not allow it at dinner tables. But that means for you to not allow your child to use a digital device during dinner times, it means you have to leave your digital device off the table as well. Our kids, again, I keep repeating, our kids learn from what they see us do, not from what we instruct them to do or what we tell them to do. So use a set timer, teach your kids to do these things. Teach your kids to master the technology, teach your kids to have a timer. So every half an hour that they're off the screen and they're off doing something physical and engaging, and they're using breaks, and 2 hours before bedtime, no screen time, as long as you have those rules. And one of the things is kids don't like being dictated to. Kids want ownership in their learning and ownership in their discipline. So as long as you guys are making those rules together and then monitoring those rules together, give your child, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour of independent screen time, which is monitored by you, but the child has a choice in what the child wants to do with that screen time, and that's great. As long as you do all those things, you're fabulously okay.
I think it's really interesting. So I think there are 2 points that you're making, which is what I'm taking away. The first is that it's not about always the quantity of screen time, though you of course sort of caveated and said about 2 hours in a day, as well as like with breaks in between, as well as no sort of screen time 2 hours before bedtime, etc. So there's something about the timing, the frequency, as well as the quantity of screen time in a day that we, need to watch out as parents. But I think the piece that you really emphasize is the quality of the screen time, right? And I think that is extremely important, because what you're sort of emphasizing again and again is technology is essentially, it can be a force for good or could be a force for evil, right? It depends on how you want to use it, how you want to perceive it. I think just to double click though, I mean, and I know this is not in a set of questions, but you keep on hearing about so many of these sort of Silicon Valley honchos, right? Running these massive tech, firms, and they are trying to keep anything digital outside of their homes, right, away from their kids. So is it because, when this is of course a new phenomenon, the virtual preschool as we see it, right? So is there something around, parents who didn't have access to a virtual preschool in the past, today they have access to that, right? And therefore the quality of engagement, of interaction, of learning from something technology based is enhanced, or are there other reasons for that phenomenon that existed till very recently?
So one of the things is all these Silicon Valley types don't have any time for their kids. So if I'm generalizing, but I'm saying that a lot of the Silicon Valley types who have built these massive businesses around technology actually don't have physical time with their kids, right? So, we don't have any absolute research and outcomes on what this does. But then it's like saying, we shouldn't have books read to kids because of what Socrates said once upon a time. Because we don't have the absolute verifiable data to make decisions on. But I kind of go along with, when I'm dealing with kids, I go along with the times, because I can't fight what's existing, right? I can only embrace it and use it to empower the children's lives rather than disempower them. So the fact is that, whatever is in the kids' world is not going to go away. Right? So how can I use it then? Even Facebook. How can I teach kids? Because whether it's Facebook or any social media, there are certain things that kids need to watch out for, right? That we do know that people only post their marriages on Facebook, not their divorces. Their good times, not their bad times, which gives our brain a sense of everyone's life is better than mine. Now that is a reality, but we need to teach that to kids. And once you make kids aware of it, I'm never going through social media and saying, oh, everyone's life is better than mine, because I know everyone's life is full of good moments and challenging moments. It's just that they're posting the good moments, they don't post the challenging moments, right? So the minute you become aware of that and you're mindful of that, the way you process it is going to be completely different. So I'd rather use, technology to enable kids to learn, rather than not. There's silly things that we put around rules and everything else, because the world is changing. We've got to embrace the new world. We've got to stop getting kids to call us ma'am and sir. We've got to stop wanting them to stand to attention when we walk in, because the signs of respect are shifting from culturally what they used to be, and we need to take kids along with us, and we don't need to take kids along with us. We need to allow them to take us along with the times. And then, as adults, we say, how do we use this time to make our kids' lives better and make them more powerful than less powerful?
And I think that's an extremely interesting construct, because what you're essentially saying is, how do we empower our kids? And I think this is the golden time and a golden opportunity before us, right? How do we empower kids to truly understand technology and to respect technology, and to also understand how technology can improve their lives, but also sort of call out what is not good about technology and learn to accept that, and learn to sort of make informed choices along the way as they grow, towards, and they become adults, right? And I think this is a great time to introduce this to them.
Naiyya, I think the most important thing you've said is, how do we teach our kids to make informed choices? And we teach them by us making informed choices. So when we make informed choices, our children will naturally make informed choices. We know for a fact that parents who read, their kids read.
Yeah. And I hear you, because my mom, we used to have this bedtime regime, right? My mom, my dad, my sister, and I would be in one bed, and we'd all be reading, from I think 7:30 to 8:30 when I was growing up. And that was like, reading time for the entire family. And then we'd sort of doze off to sleep, and, we'd be carted off to our own bedrooms, right? I totally get it, because what you see is what you basically imbibe, and it's who you become over time. So I think this is fantastic. But Lina, what about parents who don't have access? Maybe, parents who don't have access to virtual preschools. What do they do to keep their toddlers engaged in these times?
So firstly, again, another post type, because, a lot of parents are asking me when I'm doing my Facebook Lives that what do we do with boredom? Nobody understands that, other than the people who study neuroscience, that boredom is the greatest thing for creativity. So it's not our job as mums and dads to be constantly filling our kids' lives up with activity. This horrible thing that we do, even when our kids were going to school, they come back from school, we send them to GK class, and we send them piano class, and we send them here, and we send them there. We never allow them to get bored. And boredom is where creativity sits. It comes through our subconscious when we're bored. And you may not know this, but Newton came up with the concept of gravity and calculus when he was in quarantine. So imagine when we're all in quarantine, if we allow ourselves to get bored, which we don't enough, how many wonderful inventions and innovations we may come out with. So associative thought comes out of boredom. I think I'm creative, and I thought of integration of interdisciplinary curriculum way before even Finland started it. And I think it came from the fact that when I was 1 year old to when I was 2 years old, I was actually in plaster. So I was on my back, only looking up at the ceiling. My brain had to entertain itself. It had to create associative thoughts. And I'm pretty sure I must have looked up at cracks in the ceiling and made wonderful stories from them. And I write stories for children today, and I do creative work, and I don't even know where the creativity comes from, but it comes from associative thinking. Something I've read here and something I've read here. What is creativity? It's connecting dots between things that seemingly don't connect, but you connect them somehow, and you say, oh wow, that's a new idea altogether. It's a new creative art form or thought or whatever it is, and that's where creativity sparks. So one thing I'd like to ask all parents to do is to stop filling your kids' lives with activity. And virtual schooling is not about solving a boredom issue. Right? It's actually about allowing children to be mentally, physically, and emotionally engaged, and maybe giving mom a little bit of a break during that time. Right? Because mom and dad in India seems to be largely moms, but if I was speaking to Australia, I'd be saying moms and dads, because moms at the moment, if you're working, you're trying to do work from home, I don't know, how much your husband and your kids are picking up the slack of cooking and cleaning and everything else. But this is like a wonderful opportunity for the whole family to come together as a family and share chores and use kids to help set tables, to separate cutlery. That's when you're separating cutlery, that's a scientific classification exercise that you're doing. So it's just how you see it, right? You separate, colors from whites. You're teaching them color. You're teaching them, again, a classification activity. You teach them, one of our schools actually was doing a folding demonstration with kids. So the activity for that day was everyone had to come with a t-shirt, their own t-shirt, and a pillowcase. And the teacher they were doing demonstration, and the kids were actively folding. So all these are sweeping floors. These are all physical activities, and their motor activities, and their eye-hand coordination activities. It's just the framing of it that's different, right? So you can do all of this stuff with your kids at home, and don't try to keep, as long as you've got some resources around. So I would say it's your job to provide some art materials. It's your job to provide some storybooks. And it's your job to not provide toys, but provide things that kids could make toys out of. We overdo this thing in our kids' lives where we provide them with, things that move on by themselves, and kids actually have no mental process or imagination engaged with it. But you leave kids alone with boxes and saucepans, kids will make their own play out of it, So this is the time, all of that, So don't worry about anything else. Your kids can be learning with you all the time at home, and just by doing all this stuff and helping you.
So basically what I'm taking back from this is actually boredom is a construct that's made by parents and is made out of, I think, parents feeling a sense of like this FOMO, like the fear of missing out for their kids, versus the kids really actually feeling boredom. I mean, as long as they have some basic raw materials and some basic tools to keep themselves, creative, keep themselves sort of building. Right. And I think that's an important construct. And I think this FOMO also reflects with, and it kind of like it starts very early, right, in a society, in a culture like India, which is so competitive, hyper competitive from a very early age, and the aspiration for our children is so high, right? We want them always to do better than ourselves, and we invest in education, we invest in child development, but I think this FOMO kind of reflects, and it becomes a part of a child's consciousness. And we've actually started getting a lot of questions from parents of older kids as well, saying that schools are shut. How are we thinking
So,
about? Yeah, go for it, Lina. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut off for a little bit. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I think just this sort of this fear of missing out, and this focus on academic excellence is something that even parents with older kids are now talking about a lot in the BabyChakra platform, right? They have questions around, for my older child, what about academics? What about exams? What about, like grades, and like, getting to like, be ready for like an IC exam, an ICS exam. So tell me a little bit more about how educationalists such as you are approaching this.
I'll just go back. To be active all the time. So they have to unlearn. I think there's.
Hi, Lina. I'm losing you there. Checking if it's a technical issue at my end.
So I'm just going to, so then, if not kids, it's just like for a lot of anxiety in.
Hi,
Okay.
Lina, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think we lost each other there for a minute. But sorry, do you want to just start off from where you left off last?
Yeah, so I'll just say that if we've taught our kids to be active all the time, they'll have to unlearn that. So there may be a process of unlearning. Just like when we first, when we first couldn't do all the normal activities we were doing, we started feeling a little anxious. We settled. Somebody be more still, to be more calm, to be doing. So kids active will take a process, it won't happen overnight. But can you hear me, Naiyya? But for older kids, I would almost say don't worry about it at all. I'll ask you, Naiyya, how much do you remember of what you did in grade 6?
Very little. I think I remember my friends, and I remember the fun I had on sports day.
Yeah.
I remember those. And I remember, if I really look back, I remember we used to have this art and craft class with clay modeling. I remember that very vividly. Those are the things I remember from class 6.
And so what would happen really if we didn't have this year, and
yeah.
here to just reconnect with families and stuff like that? What we really till the standardized keep teachers follow what they're interested in. For it's not a big deal, just choose to stay in the present and be mindful, and if you're learning, the kids will be learning, and that's fine. I just tell everyone, just do not, if you've got food and shelter, everything else is a first world problem.
Yeah. And I think this is an important perspective, for someone like you to share, Lina, because I think a lot of parents will be very reassured listening to this, right? And knowing that this, everyone's going through this. It's not just them. And, sometimes because we are all living in our little cocoons, and, we're maybe anxious about what's happening with us and our children. I mean, there's a much broader sort of global shift that's happening around us as we speak, right? And I think this is an opportunity for us to think about a very differentiated set of skills we can give to our kids in this time, right?
Why
And the
don't we
kind,
teach our kids compassion,
yeah,
perspective? Like if we actually use this time to teach kids, yes, you may feel like this, but do you know how these kids are feeling? Because they're in a slum, and they don't even have a television, and so they've got no entertainment, they've got no access to toys and books and everything. This is a time to teach kids gratitude. That instead of sitting around the table and saying, "What did you learn today?" What were you grateful for today? You can have a gratitude jar that everyone in the family around the table, has a conversation around what they were feeling grateful for the day. Release, good chemicals in your body, and that boosts your immunity anyway. So do it, and put your shit in the gratitude jar. And wouldn't this be a wonderful thing to sort of revisit 2 years from today, and teach kids, you can't be, this is a beautiful time to understand that we can't control everything. So what can you control and what can't you control? And what you can't control, there's no use worrying about it because you can't control it anyway. So, but what can you control? And if you sit around the table, and that's another conversation you have, is what did you feel in control of today? What did you not feel in control of today? That's another wonderful conversation to have.
Lina, this kind of a conversation, I think more adults should also be having. These are core conversations, right? Around entitlement, around privilege, right? That around gratitude. I think you had a very beautiful example. I mean, I think this gratitude jar is something I'm going to take back with my family. My child is, all of 14 months. So I don't know whether she's able to sort of articulate. She can't really, she's, picking up words as we talk. But I think, there's so much that even as parents, we can take back, and, we can start filling in this jar. And 2 years later, when she's able to understand some of these thoughts, it's a beautiful gift to give to her.
Yes.
Right.
And don't forget, even if she's, she's still communicating.
Yeah.
She's still receiving energy and words, and she's still processing those. So just by virtue of you doing a gratitude journal or a gratitude jar, you're benefiting your child by the energy you're releasing. The more you're centered, the more your child will be centered.
Yeah, no, it's a very beautiful thought. It's an extremely, I think, simple thought as well at the heart of it. I think all of us can do it, right? And then, I think I'm going to take it back to the BabyChakra team as well, and maybe propose it, if that's all right with you, as an interesting exercise that we can do virtually on the BabyChakra platform as well with mothers.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful idea. So we have a lot of questions from parents, by the way. So Swati from my team has been pinging me saying there are lots of questions. Can you move on to the questions? I think some tactical questions and some more, I think, broader questions. But there's a question from a mom who's saying, we actually thought of having my baby join kindergarten in June, but now due to the coronavirus lockdown, we are unable to decide whether to join or not, because kids are prone to disease, may affect the immune system, etc. What's your opinion on this? And, what would be your suggestion, and what can I expect from schools if I do enroll her in a preschool?
So this is a time to show compassion, right? To all the teachers of the world. We, this time has taught us that, we pay lawyers and the big bucks, but who are really important? The doctors and the teachers and the nurses, the garbage collectors. These are the really important people. So if you can afford it, please pay for a preschool, because teacher salaries need to go on. So you can show your compassionate nature and the beauty of giving at this time, and the beauty of connection and village at this time, by doing things like this, which in the long term will come back to benefit you. So I would say join, and especially if the school's got a virtual preschooling, take benefit of that. And honestly, if you can afford it, if your pay hasn't been cut, or you're a business family and you have reserves, please reach out and pay preschools so that they can continue. Their rents don't stop, their Teacher salaries don't stop if they're kind and
Hi, Lina. I lost you there for the last second.
I said, look for good preschools that are doing kind and community-based things by keeping their teachers going.
Lina, actually, a question that's come up very often also on other discussions we've been part of is, a lot of parents are getting pay cuts, right? So are schools coming up with innovative ways in which they are able to support parents who might not be able to afford preschools as they were earlier? Is there something that's being constructed out? And also for schools to also keep themselves afloat, right? Because these are essential services. You have to pay your teachers.
I mean, I'll talk about Kangaroo Kids because that's the one that I do know, is that, so far no teacher salaries have been cut. So far they're continuing with virtual schooling, whether parents have paid or not. I know, for example, in one of our schools, there are close to 100 parents availing the virtual preschooling, but have said that, they can't pay right now at this time. And so it's a time for the whole world to be kind and compassionate to each other. It's a time for the whole world to act in cooperation with one another and look for the overall benefit of humanity. So if you've had a pay cut, and I would just say go to your school. Schools generally, people who start schools are compassionate people. They do love kids, and they are kind, and people will kind of help you tide through this time.
There is another set of questions, which is, how do I develop social skills in my child? Because, I think there is a question that parents have in terms of if my child is doing something virtually, are we really developing the child's social skills? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So your child's social skills are being developed in the house as well, and you don't have to only depend on the virtual school. You can have play dates. You can have a 4 people Zoom or Facebook or WhatsApp, and just have 4 kids having a play date and maybe doing art together or doing something together. So I don't want to get over anxious at this time about any of that.
And what's the best way? Another question that's come in is, what's the best way to introduce kids to technology? When to start? How to make that introduction happen? What is your advice there?
So a kid's introduction to technology happens from the moment the kid is born, because the kid is watching you use technology, right? So the introduction to technology is already there. I would be telling you a lie if I actually gave you the voice of an authority as to me knowing what the right time to use technology is, because there is no knowledge at the moment or any credible data or enough research done in the area. But say keep your kids completely off screen till they're 1.5 years old, and then gradually introduce the screen, maybe just for half an hour from the time they're 1.5 to 2. And again, it's the quality of what they're looking at or they're interacting with that's more important than anything else.
There's a question in terms of, there's a lady who's an international student in Australia, and she's actually doing her MBA, attending Zoom meetings, right? And she's saying that my 3-year-old child is actually staying with my with her parents, right? So with the child's grandparents. And, you talk a lot about how parents play such a critical part in a child's development, social, cognitive, emotional development. How can she sort of work with her parents to ensure the same level of energy or the same level of, nurture that you've shared parents can, and the role that parents can play with their child? Like any tips for grandparents, I think is a specific question here.
I don't think there's any different advice I have, other than grandparents may not have as much active energy as younger parents would have, and in that sense the mother would have to act as a coach to helping maybe routine is very important at this time, not just for adults but for kids as well. a sense of routine. A lot of people are using this time to watch Netflix till 3 or 4 in the morning. Really unhealthy. Keep a sense of routine and structure in your day, which takes care of all these developmental buckets for yourself as well as for your kids. That's all sort of advice I can give. And as long as grandparents, are not using, again, too many people use technology as a babysitter. So as long as you coach your parents not to do that, I think you should be okay.
Mm-hmm. There is a very extreme question as well, right? Which is, do you think preschooling, and I mean, coming to you, I think it's an extreme question, but do you think preschooling is not just a fad? If the family has elders and parents who give enough time and effort, should that not be enough? The question stems from the rush I see in parents to put kids in preschool and now online question mark. Are we not better off with human touch and sensitivity and just taking care of our child in our own way as parents at home?
So preschooling grew around a very real need, right? That as both parents started working, as we started going into nuclear families, so there is enough research to show that preschooling helps in the long term. Right? Now, that is more because most parents are working and most parents are living in nuclear families. But I'm not saying you have to go to a preschool if you've got a lot of time for engagement on hand, and as long as you're not one of those moms who's like this, this competitive mom who wants the kid, who's only interested in the kid's success as a report card, as long as you're open to that. I mean, I can teach a kid to read in about a week, right? And I actually did a to read. I got niece to read in about 10 days, but my nephew, when I visited Australia last, did not want to. And I get guided by the child, not by myself. Right. So if the child is guiding me that he doesn't want to read, I don't want to push reading down his throat, because learning is supposed to be joyous. The minute we teach kids that it's a force or it's a pull, what happens when you push against something? You get resistance, right? So you don't want kids to resist learning. So, but my nephew and my sister-in-law was quite upset that I hadn't done that. And I said, but look at him playing the piano. He plays the piano with both hands, and he actually composes his own music. So as long as we're not seeing success as this linear, I can write and I can read, conventional way of looking at academic outcomes, and we're more open to looking at it holistically, yeah, sure, as long as you've got the time and the energy, and you've done enough maybe reading around neuroscience as to the way the brain develops, and because we have what we call, as neural connectivity is happening in the brain, we have what we call windows of opportunity open. Just to explain it very simply, if a child's got a lazy eye because the neural connection for eyesight hasn't been laid down, the doctors will actually cover the good eye. That will strengthen the neural connectivity for the weak eye, right? But if you do it as an adult, because your window of opportunity is kind of closed, we have we have plasticity of the brain, but it takes too long. So as long as we are aware of what windows of opportunity open for the kids, and we are feeding those windows, not force feeding them, but we're allowing kids to guide us, and it's something that's done in that's wonderful. One of the big things that preschool gives you, unless you're a mom who's got access to big playground and lots of other kids coming to the playground, is interaction with other kids. And this interaction with other kids is really important.
I think that's fantastic, Lina. And I think, there are a lot of other questions, but I think, in the interest of time, we should sum up. So, I think any last thoughts? So, going back to the topic, learning not lockdown, and virtual preschool is here to stay. So any closing thoughts, any last words of advice for the parents watching this and for fellow educators watching this?
Just, kids are learning all the time. Wherever they are, whatever they're doing, they are learning all the time. It doesn't have to be always structured. So the first message I'd like to give parents is not to get stressed. The most important thing you can do for your kids right now is to breathe and to connect. And to, I use this phrase for the Maldivian teachers. There's a reason why the air hostess asks you to wear your oxygen mask first before putting it on anybody else. So mums and dads, please make sure that your own oxygen mask is on and you're breathing and you're taking care of yourself in all areas of your life, because otherwise you can't take care of anybody else. Look at this time as just a time to connect with your kids, your family. Just make the most out of the opportunity. I mean, and your kids will learn from that as well. This is a great time as a parent for you to teach your kid that everything's not always going to behave the way we want it to behave. But hey, we've got an optimistic mindset because we're going to make the best out of everything that happens.
So what I'm actually taking back personally from this incredible conversation, Lina, is that, my child is constantly watching me. She's, like what I do impacts her a lot deeper than many of us realize, right? And I think the starting point is with me and my husband. And I think I'm going to definitely start off with a gratitude jar tonight, right? Because I think that'll give me a lot of positivity, a lot of happiness, and a lot of, I think, a sense of optimism for where we are and the privilege we have. And I'm really excited about the dropping of an aria.
So this morning I did a visualization exercise. So I didn't know you before this, Naiyya. And I actually had to ask one of my team members that how do I say her name? But I visualize this in the morning in my morning visualization exercise. And this has gone beautifully, exactly the way I envisioned it. And I will be grateful for it tonight. That I had an amazing conversation with this wonderful, beautiful looking girl called Naiyya. That's going to be the last thought that I'm going to go to sleep with today.
That's so wonderful. Thank you, Lina. Thank you so much. And you've been such an inspiration to all of us entrepreneurs, right? So, I mean, multiple ways, I think you're now an inspiration to me. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to the Kangaroo Kids team and to the BabyChakra team for bringing us together and helping us have this amazing conversation. I hope it was helpful for all the parents, and a lot of unanswered questions, but we'll try and get to them personally after this chat.
And Naiyya, you have my number now. So anytime you've got a question about anything, you've got a teacher on call.
It's done. This is super exciting. Even better. I think the best outcome I could have asked for from this conversation. Thank you. Thanks, Lina. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Bye-bye.